G'day everyone, my name's AndyG, and today I'm going to be walking through how I made my track Didgeridoo, which is released on Clubwrk, combination of that BIGROOM TECHNO sound with the sound of Australia, implementing that use of the Didgeridoo of course, and let's get right into it. So we're going to start off with the iconic Didgeridoo lead straight away, so this is what it sounds like. So this one was a sample that I found on Splice, and it originally sounded like this after I turn everything off. So it already kind of had that main theme there already, but as you can hear there's a lot of low end in it as well. So we started off with an EQ, which is removing all that low end straight away. Like you can hear all of it down there, which is just nasty. And then I also increased the highs because it did lack a fair bit of highs in it too. And we also have a Saturn for a bit of more saturation. Just to bring it out that little bit more, and also just to make it a bit more brighter. And then we've also got the reverb automation, which I've covered in my last two videos, which have been a little while ago, but yeah, that's there. And we've also have an EQ on it just to remove the highs and the lows in the reverb. I could have done it in Arts Acoustic, but I feel that with an EQ I get a lot more control over it compared to the Arts Acoustic reverb. And then we have an OTT from STVW, just bringing out that little bit more. And then we have a kickstart to the quick chain, side chain doesn't always works for that one, and I've side chained it to the kick and bass, so that it plays whenever that plays, and when it's not playing it doesn't play, it's not activated. And I don't know why, but I've also put an automation for it to turn on and off, even though I didn't need to. But yeah, then we have an S1 imager to make it a little bit more wider, and then we have a sausage fattener on the end, just increasing the fatness and also the color just that little bit more. And then we have an acid lead, which plays in the second half of the drop and is basically a supporting layer to the didgeridoo. So this is what the acid lead sounds like. So that's basically copying the melody that the didgeridoo is playing, and that sound is from Serum. When it decides to load up. And this one is from an evolution of Sound Pack, and it is called Too Modern. And what I've done here is I've increased the macro in the tone knob. That's just so it's not so static, because if you hear the difference, pretty boring without any of those automations. And then stick that on and it just adds a lot more life into it. And this one probably have similar EQ to the didgeridoo. In fact, it is the exact same with the saturation. It's all pretty much similar, except there's one at the end, which is just removing the high end a bit so it doesn't interfere with the didgeridoo too much. And then you combine them together. Pretty cool. And then we also have a drum rack, but this has got all the little one shots that I've used for the last drop, and so this part is the that's the part where it says Didgeridoo, and that was a one shot and incorporating other one shots too. And I'll cover that in the last drop when I get there. And in terms of that first drop lead, that's all there is. We'll go to the kick and bass now. And so this is the kick and bass for drop 1. So pretty big. This one was actually a kick from one of the revealed techno kick packs. Surge. I may have changed the key of it. No, I kept it in that key. And this one's insane. It's a techno kick rack that I've created along with a few other processing chains that I've picked up along the way, and it's all got everything: saturation, compression, adding the rumble, and it's just big, pretty much massive one. So yeah, that's it without the rumble, and then add the rumble in. It's big. And so this is the reverb for the rumble. I'll go in depth for how I make these kicks and how the whole chain works. It's pretty in depth, and I've just removed the high end for the rumble because it kind of sticks out a bit without it. Just makes it a lot more darker. And yeah, we've added a bit of overdrive at the end of it, and then there is also got the main kick, and then we also have a little thing called tool. So it's this. It's almost like a little, it's called a clap, but it almost sounds like a real old school snare sort of vibe. And that just layers with the kick and just gives that a bit more extra punch. Just a bit more punch for that high end. And then we also have a mid kick. Just adding that click and then moving the low end, couple dips, and then a massive dip at the 10,000 hertz. And then in the group chain, we have it, that's the EQ for the intro and outro, just removing the bass. Then we have an SSL compressor. Just makes it a little bit more, sticks out a bit more pretty much. And then we have a Pro Q doing a bit of dipping because it kind of clashed with the other sounds around. That's the kick and bass for drop 1. In terms of the drums, we have some hats. This is layered because I originally just had this on its own. Wasn't enough, so I had to add one that's a bit more mid-presence, much more fuller. And in terms of processing, there's none on that, but in the group with the rolling hats, remove the low end and then also ducked some of the highs. And then we have, these are the rolling hats. It's what I've made from a previous project. And then a little tip for all of you: if you want to make sure your hats are heard and it's like not interfering with other sounds like your leads and stuff, pan them to the left or right, and it really fills out that whole audio spectrum and also gives a cool feel to the listener too, because you don't know when or like where the sound's going to come from, whether it be the left or the right ear. It's little things like that that are pretty cool. And then we also have a ride. See, this is pan 24. I don't know how it works in Ableton in terms of like the numbers, but 24 to the right. That's really far right. And then we have the tom loop, which isn't really a tom, kind of is, but it isn't. It's almost like a timbale. But yeah, there's a bit of EQing on that, moving the lows and dipping a fair amount of the highs too. Then we have a clap reverb, which is just like a little fill, almost just to fill in that gap. Then we have a drum fill from STVW. Love that drum fill, I use it in a fair bit. I've used it in my track Flight 2 with camps. And then removing a bit more of the low there. In terms of effects for the first drop, little to nothing. We just have a techno sweep after the middle of the drop, and that's just got a sidechain on it. So now we're going to go into the break. We go into the break synths. So when the break hits, we have an endless smile and a filter. This is just so that when the break hits initially, it doesn't go straight into the breakdown, and it kind of gives that little bit of tension, because we have a tension string playing, also some atmospheric sounds as well. Just to, like, when you're playing this in a club or out in a festival, it gives them just to relax a little bit more and get a feel for the upcoming breakdown. And so we have a respace. Basically use this in all my projects, the Steve Aoki big bed bass, and we have an imager on that, making it fairly mono, not completely but fairly mono. And then we have this is the updated version of the didgeridoo and the break. And this is what the original sounded like. So a fair amount of it is already there. Once again, the sample is from that same splice pack, but what I've done is that when the chord changes, I've just transposed it down to the relative chord, and then I've also sped up and slowed down certain parts of it, which what I felt fit. And so we have another OTT on it. Just make it a bit more brighter. We have an EQ, removing the low end, and then we have a big dip at 2.5 Hertz. And then we have the reverb. And then we also have the sausage fattener too, which is the same thing, using it as a limiter in this case. And so along with that, we have the little trancey synths which back up the didgeridoo rhythm in that breakdown. And what that is, that's just playing chords, but in an arpeggio style. I just put the chords together and then put a MIDI effect on it in the arpeggiator, and then transferred it to MIDI, just so I could have a bit more creative touch over it, because there was a few things that I didn't exactly like with it. And we have a Nexus playing that, and that is EDM 8 tension and up. And then we have an Isotope Trash on it, using the smooth fuzz preset. Then we have a Pro Q3, removing the lows. Then we have a Arts Acoustic Reverb, no automation on that one, kind of just let it play as it was. And we have an S1 imager, making it a little bit more, not entirely mono, but a little bit more mono than usual. And then we have the big synthy trancey break. And so this is all Nexus, the first sound, which is the main sound. is the Hands in the Air lead from EDM6. We have an Isotope Trash, also with the smooth fuzz. All of this processing here would be almost similar to the main ARP on its own, just a little bit more ducking and increasing. And then we have another Nexus, which I believe is Radar from Medium 5. Yeah, because I always use that one to fill out the mids, and I just duck the mids and the highs just so it's only, the lows and the highs, just so that it's only mids playing and it's beefing it up that bit more. And then we have a Pluck, and that one is EDM6, the Drop Square. And we also have a Transient Master on that one, just so it sticks out a little bit more and decreasing the sustain completely, just because I only wanted the attack so it sticks out a bit more. And then we also have an EQ on that, just removing that low end. And then on the group we have another OTT, a Saturn, just having a bit more saturation in the mids and highs, a Gold Foss, just to ensure that those nasty frequencies that we don't want aren't heard, and then also brightening that by a little bit too. And then we also have a Flare, which was by pure luck. I put this on the Lazy Phasey, and it acts basically like almost like a riser in its own way. Just take a listen. It's like a little siren riser, and when you put that in the context of the track, it's cool. It's a little neat effect. Then we also have a hardstyle bass, which is like the Eurodance bass, just going up and down the octave. And then we also have a vocal gate too. This one's also from Nexus, the Binary Reel 2 from Dance 2. And we have an LFO tool creating that vocal gate. And then another Arts Acoustic Reverb on that. And then the EQ, dipping a lot of the lows, low mid there's, and then also a fair bit of the highs too. And in terms of the break, like the break synths, that's all there really is to it. And we have some ambience, trusty Cashmere. So that was good, nice feeling. Then we have impacts, also from Cashmere, crash. And then we also have a vocal atmosphere. I always use these atmospheres in my packs. Not my packs, my tracks. So that's pretty cool. And the fading here is just so that it can transition smoothly when it's duplicated, because otherwise you're going to be getting clicks in the final result, and you don't want to have those clicks. So it just aims for a smooth transition. Then we have a tension string, which is also from Nexus, Hollywood Violins. And then we have this Whisper Ghost, I've called it. Just adding a bit more atmosphere into the track, and I've made that fairly wide. And in the drums, we have some cinematic drums. Making that fairly wide too. Then we have some stadium claps. Making that a lot more mono, just so it can build a bit more tension up into the break before the drop. And while that breakdown is happening, we have this playing throughout each time there's a chord change. I've changed the pitch of the person saying didgeridoo through the didgeridoo. And that's just me using the transposition in Ableton, changing the pitch relative to whatever's playing. And then we have the last drop, which I really enjoy. It's probably my favorite part. So my thought process behind this was to try and create something that if a person was to play the didgeridoo, they'd probably be able to do it, and also from what I've listened to and what I've heard. And so I've just took a bunch of one-shots in Ableton, from the sample pack, and we have ones like this, which is the person saying didgeridoo. With that one, we also have that one, and they're all the one shots. And I just played around a little bit, and this is what I ended up coming up with. And then the second half of the drop, I tried to change it up just that little bit. It's that this one here gets played twice in a fairly quick manner. And what I've done with this specific drop lead was, I think, fairly similar to what it was before, but we have a decapitator as well, just to add a bit more distortion to it. Just because it sounded a bit too clean. Then we also have this effect synth. Just adding a bit more cool little sounds to it. A sequencer from techno called Extraction. Then we have the EQ for this one. Lows, dipping mids, increasing the mids a bit more, and then dipping the highs. And kickstart with that with the sidechain, and then we have lethal here. Acting like a stab. This one is called Rave Stab 2. And then we have an EQ on that one, moving the lows and highs, just so it doesn't interfere with that main drop lead. And then the kick and bass. Same as before, but I changed it to drop 2 just for the various side chains. Then we have a side bass filter on top of it, just to remove all the high end. And then we have an LFO tool. And then we have a top side, which is the exact same side bass duplicated, but I've added a trash on top of it using the Busted Distort preset. And then we have a simpler on that, removing the low end. And then also in the EQ, removing a bit more of the highs, increasing the mids, and removing the lows. And you get this. And then included with the kick. With the lead. Sounds a little bit chaotic, but it does work. And then we have the drums, same as before. Effects, we have a lot more in here, so we have a crowd noise, which is EQ'd and sidechained, moving the lows and dipping the highs a touch. We have a CO2 can, as I've called it, but it's basically just white noise. And Atmos loop. And I've only made the mid-third because that's all we want to hear. Techno sweeps. crash. And that's all there really is to it. And there's just this vocal reverse and impact, just to make sure that you know something's coming and something's different's happening. And I believe that's it. And this is the final result, as you've heard. I've also just realized that on the drum group I've got an API 2500, and that's the drum kit heavy comp preset, and that's all I've done to that. And yeah, that's how I've made Didgeridoo. Hope you enjoy it and hope you've learned a little bit. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. All the best, guys.